get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
That's right. The Lions season is over and done with, but there is more football left to be played, so here we are, back to give you another serving of kneecaps for breakfast. Vince Progard, that's me. Happy to be joined, as always, by Phil Byrne. And Phil, tell me, we're a little over a week with the dust being settled after the aftermath of Ford Field. Walk us through, what is your perception since then? Has your opinion or mindset evolved in any way since we last spoke a week ago?
Only in the sense that after what I've seen Philadelphia do to Washington, I don't think we would have really stood much of a chance against them. If anything, it was just delaying the inevitable. I think we ran this team till the wheels fell off, literally. From all the defensive injuries that we had to clearly some distractions with the coordinators possibly leaving, maybe some assistant coaches, things like that as well. I think if we would have executed a little bit better, we could have, potentially won that game against Washington if we would have just played a little smarter. But the way that Philadelphia attacked Washington, and I realize the championship game at home could, be quite the intangible difference for Philadelphia versus if they had to come here. They got a lot of talent, though. They got a lot of talent, and even if we had the 1 seed by earning it with our wins in the regular season, you can't tell me after that result on Sunday afternoon in the first of the 2 games that that team is not deserving to represent the NFC. They look like a damn good team. So I think it's just delaying the inevitable for what we would have went through, basically.
I agree with you 100%. I mean, it's the saying as old as time, a good defense travels. They could have played that game on the moon, and it wouldn't have really mattered between the Eagles and the Lions. I know we're getting into ifs and buts radio here, but just for simulation's sake here, I mean, I think you put it perfectly, Phil. They ran that thing till the wheels fell off, and if they would have maybe played a little bit smarter against the Commanders, or maybe given it to Gibbs a few more times or something, another bounce or 2 went their way, yeah, there's definitely a scenario where the Lions could have played better and beat the Commanders, but I just don't know if they would have been able to stop what we saw on Sunday against the Commanders, because there wasn't really a whole lot of mistakes made by Philadelphia. They didn't turn the ball over. They didn't look like they had a quarterback that was gimpy. It looked like they had a running back with a lot to prove and a bunch of young, strong talent on defense with a veteran defensive coordinator and a team that's hungry to get back to the Super Bowl again. I just don't think it would have gone any better. And in your mind, Phil, I mean, I understand a loss is a loss and they all hurt in large part the same way, but do you think a loss in the NFC title game to Philadelphia at home would have felt maybe even worse than how he felt against the Commanders?
It would have felt worse against the Commanders, and I think it also, because it was at home and probably something that we felt like we had it more on our own terms than going out to San Francisco, I'd argue it probably would have stung a whole hell of a lot more than what we endured the following year. So, would I wanted this team to get into the championship game? Absolutely. You never know what is going to happen. And again, we're talking in the world of hypotheticals here, right?
Because that implies that Philadelphia would have played the exact same game against us that they played against the Commanders, which that's not logical, but just for discussion's sake.
Yeah, but I think either way it would have hurt, and again, I think we got everything out of this team that we could have possibly wanted. Whether or not we're happy with that at the end of the day, I think remains to be
different
seen.
Discussion.
I'm sure it'll sting a little bit less the further and further that we separate ourselves from this game as time moves on and things like that. But it's what happened to us. Would you rather be Minnesota and always feel like you're snake bitten once you get in the playoffs? would you also feel like the Buffalo Bills, where again we knew what they did in the '90s, but a team that can never get over that proverbial Patrick Mahomes and Chiefs hurdle? So I know we'll get into these games a little bit more, but um, it's never a great feeling to lose in the playoffs and everything like that. But I think at the end of the day, we should still be pretty thankful. I think kind of blessings, if you will, to be even in the position that we were in.
So obviously the Lions did lose and they were not a part of NFC Championship weekend. So that meant that the offseason officially began for the Lions a week ago,
Yeah,
and that began the inevitable dismantling, if you will, of the coaching staff. So the last time we talked,
yeah,
we knew that Ben Johnson was on his way out the door. He had not been formally introduced yet, but it was 99.99% a done deal that Ben Johnson was going to the Bears. He was introduced this past Wednesday, so that's a thing now. And he wound up taking a few assistants off the Lions offensive staff with him. Antoine Randall, the receivers coach, was brought over with him. I believe JT Barrett was brought
yep,
over, and a
yep.
couple other guys are going to be joining Ben Johnson's offensive staff over there in Chicago. And we knew that Aaron Glenn was a finalist for both the Jets and the Saints job, and he wound up taking the Jets job, which made sense. It's the franchise that he played for, was a Pro Bowler back in the early 90s, and he said all along that was the job he wanted. So, to their credit, both Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn both had their pick of
Yeah,
jobs, and they are both in essentially positions that they handpicked themselves. So, I guess on a macro level, good for them that they were able to put themselves in a position to, instead of just taking what's there, being in a position to essentially choose your own destiny, if you will. The defensive staff for the Lions did lose defensive line coach Terrell Williams, who was possibly a name to take over as defensive coordinator. He actually did not follow Aaron Glenn to the Jets, but rather he is going to be the Patriots defensive coordinator under Mike Vrabel. So Aaron Glenn and Terrell Williams will be in the same
yeah,
division, AFC East.
yeah. So before we get into kind of like where we are as a Lions team, Vince, I don't know if you felt this, but I feel from what I've heard on sports talk radio, what I've seen on online, just general sentiment. And again, working in kind of a large company and kind of interacting with a lot of Lions fans, I think it is a completely different attitude on how we're viewing the exits of Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson. I think Aaron Glenn, I think people knew he was super deserving of it. And with Ben Johnson, I think it's if he goes anywhere else, I just don't think it stings like it stung. But just the fact that you know he has gone in division to Chicago, he has taken a couple of assistants with us, and now it's going to be Dan Campbell versus Ben Johnson twice a year. There is no doubt in my mind, Vince. I'm calling it right now. I'm calling my shot. We 100% are going to open the season with the Chicago Bears. I think this is a storyline the NFL is going to play into in the offseason. Maybe we'll end with the Vikings like we did, this past year. They think that both teams are going to kind of traject towards the same way with a meaningful game. But there is no doubt in my mind we'll be in prime time against the Chicago Bears because I think with Ben Johnson, that hype train is going to continue to build with them, just as is the hype train was building under Eberflus this past year. But I don't know if you felt the same way, but kind of all the sentiments that I saw, everyone wishing Aaron Glenn well. I think him going to the AFC and kind of taking on a different project. I think people just don't see it as harmful as Ben Johnson staying in division here.
Well, of course not. I mean, Ben Johnson knows where all the bodies are buried as it pertains to the
Jimmy Hoffa.
exactly as it
Yeah.
pertains to the skill sets and abilities of the Lions offense, which let's face it, that's our strength. When you look at all the different sides of the ball, that's where we hang our hat on. So,
Mm-hmm.
of course, it's a huge disadvantage knowing that the guy who you're going to be lining up against twice a year knows all your secrets. It's as simple as that. Now the question is going to be, are they going to be able to create enough wrinkles over the course of an offseason to keep the opposition off balance? Only time will tell as far as that goes. But I
Yeah.
don't know, Phil. I mean, yeah, do I like the idea of having one of your brothers in crime essentially going over to the enemy? No, I don't. Do I hold any real ill towards Ben Johnson for making a move that's best for his career that he earned the ability to do so? I think I have a hard time doing that as well, just as I'm kind of thinking about it in real time. What do you think?
Um, so if you even go back into our show when we had the Lions at Bears game, I think the one thing that doesn't sit right with me, and again, he deserved to take his name out of consideration in Washington or kind of hold off onto what else, was going to be out in the marketplace for coaching vacancies for this offseason. I think the thing that doesn't sit right with me, though, is before this job even opened up, you were getting leaks that, oh, hey, yeah, Chicago's really the one that Ben Johnson's interested in. How many times did we have cutaways when the Chicago Bears offense was stalling out against the Lions that, oh, well, here's Ben Johnson. Imagine the toolbox that he'd get to play with the Chicago Bears.
I think the
And
only cutaway that happened more often was Taylor in a Chiefs game.
yeah, so it's just like, I understand things are going to get out. It just felt so premeditated,
Yeah.
and I think that's the thing that really, really bugs me with it because it isn't the first time that the Bears have hired a coordinator without head coaching experience that was highly sought after, right? It just hasn't really worked out for them. So, history is not on Ben Johnson's side that it will work out, but I think we all know what he was able to do with his offense was nothing short of just miraculous. For what we had with Anthony Lynn starting out under Dan Campbell to where we are now, it is a credit to Ben Johnson. So I think that is also kind of the scary element here. Now it is completely different leading, the entire roster of 52 as opposed to, 20 some that you would get on offense, and we'll see. But
And we don't know what kind of leader of men Ben Johnson is
yeah,
because that hasn't been put to the test before. We know his ability to call plays and draw up a bunch of trick plays and get
yeah,
to know Jared Goff more and more as a man and as a player and how to create that synergy and what have you. We don't know what his ability to lead a locker room is like or to
yeah,
deal with the media is like or do all the other things that force you to put in 16, 17, 18-hour days as a head coach. So,
yeah.
as you point out, Phil, the numbers in history do not bode well for Ben
No,
Johnson in a vacuum that this is going to work out and that it's not going to be a complete flop. I mean, you think of all the other guys, as you mentioned, that they brought
yeah,
in over the years. I don't know if any of them had the cachet going into it as Ben Johnson did recently. Like I know Matt Nagy didn't tighten up the denim back in the day, or the same could be said for the likes of Mark Trestman or any of those other Yahoo hires that they had. But hey, we'll see.
yeah. We will see, and it'll be interesting. But yeah, not to cut you off here, but Lions have been hard at work, kind of replacing those,
Have to.
getting that. Yeah,
So one thing is for sure. So the Lions did promote from within for the defensive coordinator position. Kelvin Shepard, the linebackers coach, loved by all,
yeah.
got the promotion to be the defensive coordinator. What do you think about that hire initially?
So it is one of those things that feels like it was kind of set in motion. That whether it was with the Lions or somewhere else, that he was going to be a defensive coordinator one day. Um, I'm not entirely sure if his unit is the strongest unit of that defense. I think the linebackers have gotten better under his tutelage. I think you see the growth and development of Alex Anzalone from when he signed with us from New Orleans to where he is now. He's certainly gotten better. Jack Campbell has become pretty good. Derek Barnes has become pretty good. Um, I like the clip that kind of has gone viral, and since he's been officially named our defensive coordinator, back from the Hard Knocks season a couple years ago when he was really pointing out Malcolm Rodriguez, when he was a rookie, and saying like, if you can play, we're going to play you, and really getting in. I think it was like Jared Davis. He was kind of like, really getting into and kind of these vets that um, you wanted to play the best people, you know. I think he has a lot of good leadership qualities from what I've seen. I think he's one that will be able to give that kind of rah rah, fire up, motivational speech. Obviously, a former player in the league. I think that's beneficial. So, um, it's interesting. Ben Johnson, not a Lion person that he grabbed over there, but there was obviously the Dennis Allen connection. Some folks that I do know were really hoping that it would be Dennis Allen here in
And
Detroit and get a
obviously,
kind of,
Dennis Allen and Dan Campbell go way
yeah,
back from their time in New Orleans, and he had a top 10 defense down there in the
yeah,
Bayou probably 3 or 4 times while he was there as a defensive coordinator.
yeah. So he's joining Ben Johnson in Chicago. Kind of strange how that all works out, where you would think the connective tissue would be Dan Campbell or Aaron Glenn between the two, just passing the time through there. But yeah, he'll be joining Ben Johnson there. But yeah, it's always interesting. I think with some of these ones is just looking in the kind of like emerging coaching candidate versus the proven veteran. You look at like Kansas City, right, and what they've been able to do, and Steve Spagnuolo, what he's done to the Kansas City defense, getting kind of that vet in there. You just pick some of these teams that have proven winners, and sometimes they're going to go to an experienced coach. But hey, that's not to say that that Shepard's not going to be an awesome coach. He just hasn't had that platform yet.
So I'm a little surprised, honestly. I think Shepard, if they're going to do the in-house route, he was the best option as far as who was remaining on the staff to be promoted into that defensive coordinator position.
Yeah.
My initial thought, and I could be way off on this, but I'm just kind of talking through it here, that because the defense was arguably the weakest side of the ball, and injuries notwithstanding, that was the weaker side between the offense and the defense. I would have thought in that sense, maybe you at least entertain the possibility of bringing in a voice from the outside to maybe switching some things up from a schematic standpoint. Obviously, you can't do a whole lot about scheme midstream. So it can't be
Hmm.
like, hey, we're halfway through the season. Let's just switch everything X's and O's that we're doing up from here. That's not the time to do it. The time to implement something like that's in the off season. So I thought it would have been a good opportunity to hit the reset button if they would have made a more obvious play for Dennis Allen, or if they would have looked into maybe not necessarily like a Vic Fangio type, but like a guy that's maybe getting a little over the hill and has put out some good defenses over the years. See what you can get. Lou Anarumo from Cincinnati before he got gobbled up by the Colts is another one. Look for a veteran defensive coordinator who has put out a good product on defense over the years and just at least investigate. It kind of seemed to me like the promotion for somebody on the Lions defensive staff was always going to be there no matter what. And I don't know how much thought was really given to anybody from the outside. That's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, yeah, and it could have been one of those ones that Aaron Glenn wanted Shepard to kind of take over, if he was going to go ahead and leave. And it was just kind of set in motion. And Dan Campbell had no issue with it and kind of just moved his way there. One name that I am actually still a little shocked that um, we never reached out to, considering his son is on staff, is Rex Ryan, quite frankly, to be the defensive coordinator. He has, on many different occasions, kind of been a fan of the Lions and Dan Campbell and everything that they have done. And yeah, if you're looking for kind of that like that veteran name, out there, that isn't one that they entertain. But yeah, they kept it in house, and that's Calvin Shepard is your new Lions defensive coordinator.
And the idea also would have been, hey, the offense has been a juggernaut to say the least
Yeah.
this season, going back to the previous season. maybe you try and keep it in house somehow. Look at some of your assistants under Ben Johnson and work them into a role where they're going to be the next play caller. It looks like they're going to step outside the family. It's not a done deal as of the time that we're recording here, but it sure seems like everything is pointing towards Johnny Morton as becoming the next offensive coordinator. Yes, I know you're thinking the Johnny Morton, the receiver
The guy
from
that played with Herman Moore and
the
Brett
Scott
Merriman
Mitchell.
and
No,
Barry
no,
Sanders.
not
Oh,
that. And I don't even know if he goes by Johnny. I think he
yeah.
just goes by John. But I was trying to be a little playfully facetious there. John Morton, it looks to be the next pick for offensive coordinator. I'm not going to lie to you, Phil. I know it sounds like he was a senior offensive assistant back on the 2022 squad, had served on the same offensive staff as Dan Campbell in New Orleans for a while. He is currently over in Denver right now on Sean Payton's staff. So there is the familiarity there. But I'm going to be honest with you, Phil, I didn't know who the guy was until about 48 hours ago. So
yeah.
I don't, therefore, going into it, have all this brimming amounts of confidence that that guy is going to come in, know how to call plays, know how to get the best out of Jared Goff. I have a lot more questions than answers as far as what I can expect from this offense, just at surface level, until I start to feel things out a little bit. What say you?
So one thing that we did here after Ben Johnson left, and it was kind of my thought on why they were going to go and stick with an internal candidate on this, was they wanted to get Jared Goff's input. Dan Campbell was asked in his presser last week if Jared Goff was going to have any input and say, and I mean, he didn't say, I think outright he was going to have input or
But that was
say,
the
but
implication.
he kind of alluded to it, right? So some of the reporting that I have seen today with it, again, completely anonymous name, and maybe that is because he shares the name with a former Lions wide receiver, in the '90s. I'd like to think I know this Lions coaching staff pretty well from front to back, and maybe just because in 2022 they really hadn't broken out yet, that I wasn't too ingrained into kind of the low level like analyst positions and things like that. But
Yeah, because that was still the squad that started out 1-6. I mean, we
yeah,
weren't really getting into the Lions until Thanksgiving and beyond at that point. And I think we were more into the euphoria of what was happening right in front of our eyes before, instead
yeah.
of thinking about, like you said, the bowels of the coaching staff.
But some of the reporting that I have seen today was that, um, because you would have had Ben Johnson basically in his first year as offensive coordinator during all of this, or taking over as Anthony Lynn was kind of shown the way out. That John Morton played a pretty big role in getting Jared Goff acclimated to things in Detroit. Um, he's had some previous stops. It sounds like he had a stop with the Jets a while back that didn't really go that well.
He
I'll be
was on
honest.
USC's offensive staff back when they were still kind of humming a little bit. He wasn't the primary play caller, I don't think, but I think he at least had some input as to what was going on down there at USC back, in the 09, 2010, back before they kind of fell off that cliff a little bit for a few years.
Um, he's local. He's from Auburn Hills. He went to Western, Fire Up Chips. So we are a little indifferent on that, of course, being Central grads listening to this podcast. But hey,
It's all about the toilet paper.
I think he has a good mind for offensive football. He's super well connected. To me, though, I have some concerns, I guess. I mean, I would assume offense is going to change up a little bit under his direction, assuming this is pretty much a done deal at this point. Um, Again, the Sean Payton connection, I like that. You can't say enough good things about it. Seemingly an offense with not a ton of star power or firepower, having a pretty good productive year. I think Bo Nix definitely exceeded any sort of expectations.
For a rookie, absolutely.
But where has the play calling or OC experience been to this point. I think he's 50 or 55, somewhere in that age
55.
range. Yeah, and just like what is it now that we're getting at this point? I think there are some good names that are on the staff too. Obviously, we saw Antoine Randall and JT Barrett go with Ben Johnson to Chicago. If I'm Mark Brunell, I'm kind of wondering what do I have to do to get into consideration to be an offensive coordinator in this league with his credentials as a player.
And same thing,
Certainly,
I wouldn't know the guy if he delivered a pizza to my house, but Tanner Engstrand, the passing game
yeah.
coordinator, same thing. He was getting a lot of people predicting that he was going to be the guy, and it sounded like it never
So
really got to that point.
the only thing I'm maybe a little confused on with why those two aren't the same is maybe Dan Campbell does want to get a little back to the run game. Is kind of the identity of this team. The other thing too is I haven't seen anything announced yet, but Aaron Glenn is going to need an offensive coordinator with the Jets. You would think that he's probably going to be going back to someone who was on staff with us or to the Saints lineage that he had, when he was getting started again as well. So who knows? Maybe Brunell or Engstrand is going to be going out to the Meadowlands with him as well. But yeah, John Morton, not the receiver, but the guy from Auburn Hills and Western Michigan. Sounds like he is going to be your next Lions offensive coordinator.
And possibly assuming that Aaron Glenn does leave the Lions offensive coaching staff alone for his own benefit with the Jets. If nothing else, you bring in a different guy to call the plays, but Jared Goff at least has the same quarterbacks coach and the same passing game coordinator, so at least it maintains some level of continuity on the staff instead of having the entire offensive staff as it pertains to the quarterback be a musical chairs and guys moving into different roles and everything like that. So instead of three different positions changing, you're only talking about one. Again, I'm thinking about this on the fly, but who knows? Could happen.
One thing I do want to mention, though, as we are kind of getting the coaching things, one thing that will help the continuity, at least for the run game, at least for the offensive line, we did bring back Hank Fraley, who was kind of sought after with
Yeah.
a position for the Seattle Seahawks. So that will help. It sounds like he has a little bit of like an elevated job title and position. I think he's like run game coordinator.
Yep. Yep.
Again, these facets of the game and coordinator.
Put it this way, Phil, if a guy wants
know.
to have a position created for him in this league, teams will find a way to do that.
I mean, think about how many former coaches that Nick Saban would employ, in Alabama as offensive assistants. Heck, I think we had two former CMU coaches, Butch Jones and Dan Enos, doing that at, a couple different junctures. So totally agree with you on that one. But yeah, Hank Fraley is staying with us and not going to, anywhere else at the moment.
Yep, that is very good news. So we will have to see because, again, this is a fluid situation, and that's a very good observation and call out, Phil, that Aaron Glenn is going to need an offensive coordinator pretty soon. He was non-committal in his introductory press conference as to what he wants to do with the quarterback position. So whether he brings back Aaron Rodgers or whether they look to the draft or something else, that remains to be seen, but we'll just have to wait and see if the Lions staff is going to change any more than what it already is. But that's how it is right now. So we'll just keep on pressing and just kind of see what happens from there. All right, Phil. The championship weekend, as we mentioned at the top of the show, took place over the weekend, and it was Philadelphia all over the Commanders.
Mm-hmm.
And as we expected, a tight one between the Bills and the Chiefs, which once again went the Chiefs' way. Once again, Josh Allen can't get the job done in the postseason against Patrick Mahomes. It's like he's met his kryptonite, but that's that's what we're looking at in the rematch of the Super Bowl from 2 years ago. The Chiefs taking on the Eagles in Super Bowl 59. And Phil, what was your opinion about championship weekend because of what happened to the Lions? Did you wind up watching the games or kind of keep it on as background noise, or were you out on it completely?
I wasn't super invested into the NFC game, to be honest. I kind of thought that it was going to go Philadelphia's way. I think very much like the men's basketball tournament, at some point, Cinderella, the shoe just has a difficult time of fitting. And with the glass slipper. Um, they just, from top to bottom, I think have a just much deeper roster. The Commanders absolutely have the foundation of something in place to be really, really special. Um, you want to talk about the rejuvenation that we had, that year when we went up to Lambeau when we shut down Aaron Rodgers for the final time in Green Bay. And imagine how excited they have to be, right? They have Jaden Daniels. They have a coach that seems reinvigorated, that has already had a lot of success in the NFL in Dan Quinn. They finally have an owner and a GM that appear to be on the same page and making smart decisions. And, they just need to continue to plug. They got Bobby Wagner, they got Marcus Lattimore. They have some vets to kind of get things done for a little bit, but they're a little bit of an incomplete roster, right? Because they've only been good for this year. So nothing to hang their head about Philadelphia. Um, Listen, I think it's still going to be Kansas City, if you want my honest assessment of it. But what they can do with Saquon Barkley, that is how you got to beat the Chiefs. And I think the Bills, um, James Cook, I think pretty good running back. He's not Saquon Barkley, though. And I think to try to match the Chiefs' tempo, it didn't really work. I think also the Bills got a little too conservative in that game when it came to the play calling in the first half and not trying to go for it on some of the fourth downs, settling for field goals. That's just not how you're going to beat Kansas City. Because even if they have a down quarter like they did in the third quarter, once that fourth quarter rolls around, Mahomes is going to start to get dialed in a little bit more. And that's exactly what happened. So here we are with Kansas City and Philadelphia once again. And with everything else in the world, it's just kind of like, oh, here we are again.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what we got as the matchup now.
So I was into both the NFC and the AFC game. I wasn't really in on the whole, since the Lions lost, I'm out on football altogether. That's not the kind of sports fan I am. I understand that
Yeah.
heading into Sunday's games, there was only 3 games left in the NFL season. Then we have no football to speak of as far as
Yeah.
on the field is concerned until August. So I'm enjoying every bit of it that I reasonably can. I did, however, turn the channel before any of the celebratory stuff or the trophy presentations. I really wasn't in the mood for watching people celebrate and be happy about what happened on the football field. And that's not usually like me. Usually I'll sit and watch all that stuff, and I had no interest in either the NFC celebration or the AFC celebration. But
Right.
I think what happened was I was lulled into a false sense of skepticism based on what I saw in the Packers game. That was a game where Green Bay obviously went into that game against the Eagles really nicked up, and the Eagles didn't put out the most inspired performance I'd ever seen at home
Right.
in the
Yeah.
elements. And the same thing could be said the following week when the Rams came to town. We kind of
Yeah.
knew going in, based on the way the Rams defense had played, that it was going to be a real tightly contested defensive battle. And yeah, it came down to the second to last play of the game. Not really a situation where you were thinking, hey, this Eagles team looks like they're it, as the kids these days like to say. And boy, I took the Commanders plus the 5.5 points, thinking, hey, they may not win the game outright, but they'll keep it close. Daniels will play mistake-free football. The team itself will play mistake-free football. They haven't turned the ball over hardly at all in a month. And same thing that happened to the Lions. If the Commanders actually hang on to that football, the game goes a different way. But we know from watching a lot of Eagles games that they're quite adept at forcing turnovers, and that's exactly what happened. They were the better team, and as I said, running the ball, having a good running game, and a good defense travels. So I fully anticipate them giving Kansas City their best shot. But as we get into the AFC game, Phil, and it was kind of fitting being the 5-year anniversary of the death of Kobe Bryant, I think Patrick Mahomes is the one player. I don't know how to fully explain it, but he probably has that Mamba mentality more than just about any other player I've ever seen in the NFL. And that even tops what I've seen from Tom Brady. And I think that might be because Mahomes is more of a Swiss Army knife of an NFL player than Tom Brady was. And there's ways of getting things done that he knows how to crack codes and figure things out the way I haven't seen from any other player. And on paper, if you're Buffalo, you've got a all-pro caliber quarterback, you've got a good running game, you've got a serviceable defense. I know they've battled some injuries in the skill position, guys who Josh Allen can throw the ball to, but by all intents and purposes, they have a roster that can, on paper, win a Super Bowl. And that's got to be just as frustrating as it is for Lions fans to once again just not be able to turn the trick when the chips are down.
Yeah, it is. And you almost kind of have to wonder, as they're going in this off season now, is there going to be like, is Josh Allen, with the limitations that he has, is he going to be kind of like this generation's John Elway, that he won't get to be able to taste that success until the, far second half of his career? I would envision once Buffalo gets into a little bit of a better cap situation, yeah, they did get Amari Cooper and, some of these vets, but I'd still contend that even though their roster is really good and probably, obviously top three in the AFC, uh, they don't have the game wreckers necessarily that even like a team like the Eagles do, on that defense. Or, they don't have an AJ Brown that is just like a physical specimen, that Josh Allen can sling the ball to. And it's just really disheartening. I think most of America, if you're not Taylor Swift, if you're not a Kansas City Chiefs fan, probably just wanted to root for something other than the Chiefs, and was pulling for the Bills in that one. It really wasn't meant to be. And then just to kind of follow up on a point that you made on that Eagles Commanders game, for me, the thing that really hurt watching that game, listen, Saquon Barkley, he's in a league of his own. Jahmyr Gibbs, though, is so damn good. And I know our defense was not playing the level that the Eagles played in that game, but they showed you the blueprint. We got so far away from that blueprint, and maybe Jared Goff did have a concussion, and just the 5 turnovers, man. Like, we didn't, not to go back into that game,
That's
but we
what it
just didn't
was,
do
though.
anything right.
Yeah. You picked your
So,
worst possible day to have the worst possible day at the office.
yeah. Yeah.
But in any case, we're not going to spend any time breaking down the Super Bowl in this episode. That'll be next week. But Chiefs, Eagles for the Super Bowl 59 title. And last word on this, Phil, I don't think there's any doubt that Jalen Hurts is a little bit healthier than he led people to believe, being a little bit coy in that post-game interview last week.
Yeah, no, he looked pretty good, and he'll get a little bit more time to rest up. So, it should be a competitive game, in a couple of weeks. But credit to the Eagles. I mean, they look like they were bound and determined to get that thing done against the Commanders. And again, that's the third time that these teams have faced. So they knew each other really, really well coming out of that NFC title game.
You're listening to this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, along with our resident Florida Gator, Phil Byrne. And Phil, there's a reason I'm going to get to the whole Florida Gators connection. Just trust me here. But recapping NFC and AFC championship games, as well as the Lions coaching fiasco that took place this past week with the max exodus of coaches off of the Lions coaching staff, which we didn't necessarily get caught off guard by. We knew that was going to happen. Statistically, we've never seen a team that has lost both offensive and defensive coordinators go on to win a Super Bowl in the ensuing year. So it'll be up to the Lions to take the offseason and figure out how they're going to buck that trend. But let's take a look at some of the other head coaching news that took place in the NFL this past week. We already know the first 3. We talked about Mike Vrabel a week ago going to the Patriots, and obviously we know all about Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. So those were all the first 3 jobs to get filled that were available. The New Orleans Saints job, as of this recording of the episode, is still open, and it doesn't seem like there's a lean one way or the other about what the Saints are going to do. I know that some people were saying that maybe once the Commanders season ended, they'd make more of a serious play for Cliff Kingsbury. Just in the last 36 hours since that loss, I'm not really hearing much more on that. And Kingsbury is still getting paid head coach money from his buyout with the Cardinals from a few years back. He's getting paid head coach money to be an offensive coordinator with a pretty good, solid offense that he's got in our nation's capital. So maybe he's content to stay put another year. We'll have to wait and see. The remaining ones, though, Phil, and we're going to start with your hometown Jacksonville Jaguars first. Things just kind of got weird as the Thursday turned into Friday and whatnot this past week. So the Jaguars were pretty big on the Liam Cohen train. Cohen is the offensive coordinator from Tampa Bay with really hardly any drop off between Dave Canales, last year's coordinator, to Liam Cohen from this year. It looked like the Buccaneers offense and the play of Baker Mayfield didn't skip a beat from one year to the next. So he was kind of that guy the Jaguars had their eye on. But as you may remember, the Jaguars parted ways with Doug Peterson. They did not do the same with their general manager, Trent Baalke, who is not the most liked guy among NFL circles, I guess you could say. And the owner of the Jaguars, Shad Khan, basically said, I'm not firing my general manager, but if you can convince me otherwise, then that's a conversation we can have down the road, while Baalke was sitting right there in the room. So that just, if that didn't reek of dysfunction before, Phil, I think we're already kind of halfway there at this point.
It seems like every year, one of these coaching hires just goes so far south and kind of just unveils a little bit of the kind of behind the door happenings in some of these meetings, that just because you're successful in business and you've accrued or inherited money doesn't mean you necessarily know anything about football, anything about management, anything about like proper protocol when bringing people in for interviews or anything like that. And I don't want to use the term like train wreck in Jacksonville, but my goodness, what a clown show.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is a
So
clown show.
So here's how this all unfolds here. So it's pretty apparent at the time. Now this is Wednesday. We start the timeline here that it seems pretty obvious that, you know what, Jacksonville's not really going to do anything about this general manager thing. I'm not really feeling it. I'm Liam Cohen and I'm going to bow out gracefully. Thanks for your time. And then he immediately picks up the phone and starts talking with Tampa Bay. And now he's in discussions to becoming the NFL's highest paid coordinator. And he's going to be back with the Buccaneers calling the plays at a substantial pay raise. And everybody goes home happy, right? Well, no, because Shad Khan isn't big on taking no for an answer. So apparently the fact that he was left at the altar by Liam Cohen, that was enough to then put a bullet in the head of Trent Baalke. Now all of a sudden he calls back Liam Cohen and says, hey, we got the problem out of the way. You want to reconsider? And then Liam Cohen takes the Jaguars job, and as the Buccaneers are calling him asking, hey, you going to sign this deal that we drafted up for you, he went all new phone who dis on him and just let it go right to voicemail every time. So
Hey, remember that Trent guy that you were complaining about? Well,
he won't be a problem
come to find
anymore.
out, he's a real doofus. So we let the problem take care of itself. And yeah, as you so alluded to it, they just kind of went off him, life sentence style.
Yeah.
So he's no longer there in
No,
Jacksonville.
no. So Liam Cohen, ladies and gentlemen, your new head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. So you think that's about as weird as it's going to get? Think again. The sexy thing, as we saw with the Jacksonville Jaguars, the sexy thing in the head coaching world is to promote the young, up-and-coming offensive mind to be the next head coach of a struggling franchise, right? That's the formula. Apparently, the Las Vegas Raiders missed the memo by bringing in old defensive-minded Pete Carroll, who's about 100. He's only 73, but still the oldest head coach to ever put on a headset. So you got Pete Carroll jumping up and down, chewing the gum, no path to a quarterback, but he's going to be your guy with the Las Vegas Raiders next season. So just when
You
you thought
know,
it couldn't get any weirder than what was going on in Jacksonville, you got Pete Carroll back for another go round.
I know older people do love the heat and the warmer climates, but you might be able to watch him rot in real time on the sideline as the vultures, just kind of circle around the casinos there in Vegas and pick them off, But hey, listen, Pete Carroll's done some tremendous things
He's won a Super
in this
Bowl
league.
and a college national championship, so he's as much of a winner as you can get.
So, I mean, I will say this: like, it seems like the Raiders the last couple of years, like after the John Gruden and Mike Mayock kind of fiasco, um, have just really had really unproven guys. Even a Josh McDaniels resurfaced there. This is still the son of Al Davis that is the owner there. It sounds like Tom Brady was kind of instrumental in getting a new general manager from Tampa out there, and then also kind of settling on Pete Carroll. I think they were a little slow in terms of what they were looking for and making a move on it. Um, I don't think Pete Carroll will be there long term, but hey, listen, he knows what he's doing. I just don't know if the game has moved past his philosophies yet. But he's a better coach than what they've had in a long time. I'll give him credit for that.
Yeah, let's be honest. I mean, we talked about the young, up and coming offensive mind. I mean, there's only been one exception to that I can think of in the last however many decades. You had Sean McVay get the job done with Stafford that first year that he was out there in Los Angeles. Other than that, it's been the likes of Andy Reid, old guy, and Bill Belichick, old guy, for as long as I can really remember. And the whole young guy thing isn't really what wins Super Bowls, at least not up until now. So we'll have to see. I mean, obviously, you get a crack at either another old guy winning it this year with Andy Reid or young offensive guy and Nick Sirianni getting the second crack at it. So we'll just have to wait and see. So that's as bizarre as it is going to get between the Jaguar situation and what the Raiders did with Pete Carroll, right? No, of course it's going to get worse because you still have the Dallas Cowboys on the clock trying to figure out a head coach. And Phil, when I saw the news break, I thought you and I were still back at our old stomping grounds in Mount Pleasant.
So
We
they
were
hired
still on
Marty.
college radio. And when Brian Schottenheimer was getting all these head coach interviews back when he was an assistant with the Jets back under Rex Ryan and working on Jeff
Yeah.
Fisher's staff and all that. And then he basically just disappeared into ether for about 10 years. And you get Brian Schottenheimer being named the head coach of the Dallas freaking Cowboys. Are you serious, Phil? I mean, like, I get that he was the offensive coordinator the last couple of years, and he got to know Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and those guys pretty well. But as we always say, it was Mike McCarthy's offense, not Brian Schottenheimer's offense. He was just kind of a guy with a headset and the clipboard or the tablet or whatever. And like Jerry Jones didn't call anybody in except for Leslie Frazier just to satisfy the Rooney Rule, and that was really all he did except pick up the phone and talk to Dion for a couple of minutes. But like that was it. Like has Jared gone just fully senile on us here, or is he the smartest guy in the room? I don't even know what to make of this.
Uh, yeah, and I had to double check. I was like, just because we had the Pete Carroll news break the day before, I had to double check that I didn't read that as Marty Schottenheimer. And
He is no longer with us. I can confirm Marty is
yeah,
he's
yeah,
below the
rest in
grass.
peace, rest in peace. But listen, I think he's a guy that's been around for a long time, and his son and Brian. Um, he's seen some things. I think there is something to be said for a coach that once was like the flavor of the week and went through the ringer, or maybe went through some personal stuff or something like that, and comes out the other side. To me, though, I thought it was either going to come down to Dion or Kellen Moore for that position. And they really wanted to go on the Kellen Moore route. I mean, they probably only had to just wait a couple more weeks, to make that official and maybe even have some sort of agreement in place, that he was going to become the head coach
Heck,
there.
it happened with the Vikings and Kevin O'Connell. They waited and
Yeah.
waited and waited, and that was kind of the understanding. And as soon as the Rams won that Super Bowl, it was announced the very next morning. I mean, it could happen if they wanted him bad enough.
Yeah. So, anyways, the NFL is a strange business sometimes in the coaching cycles, and I think the other thing we have to take into account too is a lot of these coaches all have the same agent, or at least they do in college football as well. So it's just a very, very strange game, and often the name that when these positions and openings kind of happen, you're like, oh yeah, no, that would make sense. 3 weeks later, you're like, wait, huh? How did we get here? How did this story play out? But that's what happened. And yeah, as you perfectly alluded to, all three of those stories just seemingly bizarre, on how we ended up at, the conclusion, the end of the ride, if you
And
will.
they all just kind of one-upped each other. Like they went in the same order that we kind of broke it down, and each one was just more head-scratching than the next. I mean, I can put myself into this position here. Like if I were to apply for my dream job to be a play-by-play guy or a PA announcer for some big-time institution or to do play-by-play for a network or something like that. Granted, I've been out of that field for like 15 years. The very first question I would ask if I even got so much as an interview is, what the hell have you been up to the last 15 years that nobody in the whole world took a leap of faith and decided to hire you? The same thing could be said for Brian Schottenheimer. It's like you got all these interviews to be a head coach 15 odd years ago. Nobody bid on it. Why should I put my reputation even more on the line than it already is? And obviously, Jerry's dying wish is to win another Super Bowl. He's looking more sickly every time I see him. Like, this is the guy that he thinks is going to be. I just don't know that I buy it. Just something seems kind of fishy about this here.
I could not tell you the team he's associated with or if he's even in football. But hey, you know what? There's always hope for Leslie Frazier, right?
He was allegedly the assistant head coach of the Seahawks. I believe me.
Okay.
I had no idea. But
yeah.
We don't like to tell lies on kneecaps for breakfast, but
no lies.
Yeah, so maybe that gives me a little motivation, Phil, to go out there and maybe give one last ditch effort to go follow my dreams. Because if old man Jerry Jones can take a chance on Brian Schottenheimer, of all people, to be the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, like I don't even know what Stephen A. Smith's reaction was. I've been kind of out of the loop as far as that goes, but like, I can't believe Stephen A. was like, "Hey, that's a good hire for the Dallas Cowboys and Jared Jones." Like, no, you kidding me? But hey, like I said, maybe it gives me one last ounce of motivation to go out and chase my dreams once and for all.
Hey, there's hope for Jim Schwartz still getting that head coaching gig too, and
use the Schwartz.
Be the first fired Lions coach to rebound and be a head coach somewhere else at some point.
Yeah, buddy. But as we said, the New Orleans Saints still are on the clock as far as hiring a new head coach. But again, we got no lean one way or the other.
No leading candidate. I guess two names that would make sense for me if I'm just trying to connect the dots. And who knows? These have been so strange with where they've gone. I would think maybe Joe Brady, Buffalo Bills offensive coordinator, spent time at LSU, or even Mike McCarthy. Quite honestly, I could see him getting a run in New Orleans just because he was Sean Payton for a while, down in New Orleans as well. Those are probably the only two names that I would think, though. Again, I thought that was going to be.
What about Darren Rizzi?
Yeah, maybe they'll just run it back with Rizzi.
Yeah.
Bring back the Rizzler.
But that's a conversation for another week. We are out of time on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast.
We're going to end it with the Rizzler?
We're going to end it with the Rizzler, absolutely.
Okay.
We've got one more week to go before the Super Bowl, so we're going to break down Super Bowl 59 between the Chiefs and the Eagles. as well as any other happenings that happen with the Lions over the next week. Phil and I are going to be here to break it all down as it happens. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.